very good morning, children. So yesterday we have learnt about the respiration and we have seen the introduction of the respiration unit. Hope you all followed that. Okay. Now we'll see what are the various events which are, or otherwise you can say steps in the respiration. Events or steps in the respiration. As you can see on the board, there are 5 different steps which involve in the process of respiration. The first step is breathing. So what is breathing? Breathing is nothing but taking the air, or you can say you will not take the air, but the air voluntarily moves into the nose, into the nostrils, isn't it? So the movement of air into the nostrils, okay, and also it comes out of the lungs, right? So it enters inside the lungs and exits outside the lungs. So it is completely a phenomenon which is involuntary. You don't have to do any kind of voluntary action. Okay, so that is the first thing. The second step is gaseous exchange at lungs level. Okay, so the air which goes into the nostrils, okay, it follows a pathway and the air enters into the lungs. So once it enters into the lungs, whatever the carbon dioxide is there in the lungs, that should be exchanged with the oxygen which is present in the air which you breathe. So there will be exchange of gases in the lungs, especially with the help of the alveoli which are present in the lungs. So what are alveoli and all, we'll come to know in the next part. Okay, and third one is the gas transport by blood. Whatever the oxygen which enters into the lungs, right, all the lungs, especially alveoli, has the blood capillaries attached to it, which will allow the oxygen to enter, or which will take the oxygen and sends it to the different tissues in the body. So this is done by the blood. Blood will take the oxygen. Already we have discussed that the blood has the pigment which is called as the hemoglobin. Okay, and this hemoglobin will bind with the oxygen and transports it to the different parts of the body, different tissues of the body. Okay, so and also whatever the carbon dioxide which is produced in the body or in the tissues, that will be brought again back by the blood. So blood is the one which transports the oxygen and also which brings back the deoxygenated blood, that is the blood filled with the carbon dioxide, to the lungs once again. So this is how the third point goes. And fourth one is exchange of gases at tissue level. So now whatever the oxygen which you breathe, it goes into the tissues, isn't it? So once it goes into the tissues, so gaseous exchange at tissue level. So the gases which are being taken by the blood will go to the different tissues and all, and it will be utilized by the tissues, and whatever the carbon dioxide which is produced, okay, that will be taken back by the blood. So the gaseous exchange is actually taking place in the tissues. That means tissues are the ones, or a group of cells are the ones which are taking the oxygen and giving out the carbon dioxide. It's not only the lungs which are helping in this. Lungs is not converting the oxygen into carbon dioxide. It's not the blood which is converting the oxygen into carbon dioxide, but it's the cells which are taking the oxygen and giving out the carbon dioxide. So that is the exchange of gases basically takes place at the tissue level or the cellular level. And fifth one which you can see is the cellular respiration. The cellular respiration here, so the oxygen, when it goes into the cell, it combines, or it reacts with the glucose which is present in the cell, and then the reaction will take place. Okay, the glucose burns in the presence of oxygen and gives out the energy which is required for all the life processes which help in our survival. And also a lot of heat is released, and also carbon dioxide is released. So all this process. So what is cellular respiration here? Cellular respiration is a place where the gases, which is like oxygen, goes into the cell, and then it converts into the carbon dioxide and releases a lot of energy along with the heat and also carbon dioxide. So all these 5 steps we are going to study in detail. Okay, we are going to study all these 5 steps in detail now. So the first step which we are going to study is the breathing. So now we'll start what is breathing. So the first stage or the first step in respiration is breathing. So in the previous classes we have learned about different scientists working on different gases and how they discovered the different gases which are present in the air. So here we are going to see one more experiment here, a small experiment here. That is, as you see in the picture, we have taken 2 test tubes, okay, and we have covered it with the rubber cork and we have inserted 2 tubes and all. So what we are doing is we are breathing out the air outside. In one beaker, in one test tube we have taken the water, and in the second test tube we have taken the lime water. So when you continuously breathe out the air, the lime water, it will not change. Water will not change, it will remain the same. But whereas the other one, that is which has the lime water, that turns into milky white, that is into a white precipitate. Why this is happening? This is happening because the air which is coming out of your mouth is the carbon dioxide. That means the oxygen is utilized inside and the carbon dioxide comes outside. And this carbon dioxide, when it comes in contact with the lime water, it changes the lime water into milky and also into, otherwise you can say, white precipitate. Okay, so now coming to the pathway of, so now we'll see the pathway of air. In the pathway of the air, that means how the air enters inside the blood. How the air enters into the blood. So what is the pathway which is followed? So the air which is outside will enter into our nose, right? So through a bird called as the nostrils. The 2 openings in our nose are called as the nostrils. We have the right nostril and also the left nostril. Okay, so these are the 2 nostrils through which the air enters inside. Okay, so the next one is the nasal cavity. So the second one is the nasal cavity. So this nasal cavity is the empty space which is present in the nose here. So whatever the empty space which you are able to see here is nothing but the nasal cavity. And this nasal cavity is divided into 2 parts because of a wall-like structure which is called as the nasal septum. This nasal septum is dividing the nostrils into this cavity into 2 equal halves. Okay, right nasal cavity and the left nasal cavity. And this nasal cavity is lined by a mucous membrane. It's lined by a mucous membrane, and also there are some tiny hair particles which are in the nose. Now, what is the work of these tiny hair-like structures which are present in the nose? What they do is they will filter the air. Basically, their main function is to filter the air. The tiny dust particles which enter into the air are actually stopped by these hair-like structures and also the mucous membrane which is present in the nose. So this mucus along with the hair-like structures, they will filter the air. So the major work which is done by nasal cavity is filtration of the air with the help of the mucous membrane as well as the tiny hair-like structures. So, and one more thing here is, whatever the air which you inhale, right? So your body temperature is 98.4 degrees Fahrenheit. So the air which goes inside should also match your body temperature. So when the air goes inside, see what is the kind of air which maybe you are, if it's winter season, you'll be breathing the cool air. If it is summer season, you'll be breathing the hot air. If you keep on breathing the hot air and all, no, it may dry up the mucous membrane. So it will drive the pathway to the lungs. So what happens here is, when the air enters inside the nose, it becomes moist. Water vapor is added to that air, and the air is brought to the body temperature. Okay, nasal cavity is the place where water vapor from the mucus is added to the air, and air is brought to the temperature of the body. So I mean equal to the temperature of the body. That is what the nasal cavity does. And the third one is the pharynx. This pharynx is the common passage for the food and also the air. So common passage, I mean it's a common passage for the food and also the air. So, and moreover, to control the passage of food and also to control the passage of air, there is a special organ which is called as epiglottis, which is present in the pharynx, which will not allow the food to pass into the next part, that is the larynx, so that the food will directly enter into the esophagus. If there is no epiglottis, whatever food you eat, it might directly enter into the lungs. Okay, so there is a epiglottis is a part which will not allow the food to enter into the larynx. Okay, so that is what the pharynx does. And the next part of the pharynx is the larynx. Next part is the larynx. Larynx, you can see here, this one is the voice box. Larynx is also called as the voice box. So this voice box will consist of vocal cords. There are 2 vocal cords in number, and these vocal cords will produce the sound so that you can talk. Okay, so whenever we talk, when we breathe out, okay, so you cannot talk when you're taking the air inside. When you're taking the air inside, you cannot talk. You can just try, you can give it a try and check it whether you are able to talk when you're taking the air inside. So it's highly impossible. So whenever you breathe out the air, so the air which is coming out will vibrate the vocal cords and produces the sounds. And because of this, what the sounds are produced, and using your lips, using your tongue, using your mouth and all, you will turn them to different sounds, and then you will talk. That is what is actually happening in the larynx. Larynx is also called as the sound box. It's also called as the sound box. So it is the base for the, it's a place which is base for the speeches, for the songs, okay, for the talk and whatever it is. So that is how the larynx will help us. And the next one is the trachea. So trachea is the next part which is present in the pathway of the air. So after larynx, the next part which is connected is the trachea. Trachea is a structure which can easily collapse, but that is surrounded by some C-shaped cartilaginous rings which will not allow it to collapse. So that will allow the air to pass into the lungs. So trachea is also called as the windpipe. Which extends from the larynx into the lungs. Okay, so trachea is exactly present after the larynx. So here you can see the nostrils, and the air will pass into the nostrils first, okay, and which you can see here is the nasal cavity where the air is filtered, and then air enters into the pharynx. This pharynx is the common passage for the food and water, okay. And now this pharynx is also linked with the esophagus, and this esophagus will carry the food into the stomach, okay. So now what is the air which you breathe should go into the next part which is called as the larynx. So even the food also, when it comes into pharynx, it has chances to get into larynx, but whereas here this epiglottis will close the pathway into the larynx so that the food will directly enter into the esophagus and then enters into the stomach. So this epiglottis is preventing the entry of food into the larynx. So next one is the larynx. Here you can see this is a larynx where there are 2 vocal cords which will vibrate, and when you exhale the air outside. So when you exhale the air outside, these 2 vocal cords will vibrate and produce the sounds through which we are able to give a speech or also sing songs and what not. Okay, and then you can see the structure which is called as the trachea. Trachea is also called as the windpipe. Is also called as the windpipe, which will carry the air into the lungs. So here now you can see the pathway, isn't it? So first one is the nostrils, second one is the nasal cavity, then pharynx, then larynx, and then trachea, and then you can see here the next part is the bronchi. You can say bronchi. Okay, this one is the bronchi here. So this singular is called as the bronchus. So here this bronchus will come here and it will divide into two, which we call it as the bronchi. And this bronchi will enter into the lungs. So that means the air which is coming through the trachea will enter into the lungs through the bronchi. So bronchi are the divisions, two divisions, one goes into the left lung and one goes into the right lung. So here this part is the trachea. Trachea is also called as the windpipe, which extends into the lungs. So they will come and end at the lungs. Okay, and now next part is called as the bronchus. This is the bronchus, which is divided into two parts. One bronchus enters into the left lung and one enters into the right lung. So singular is called as the bronchus and plural is bronchi. So this bronchi will take the air into the right lung and also into the left lung. Now this bronchus will enter into the lungs and also will divide into tiny branches and they will extend all over the lungs. They extend all over the lungs, and these extension of the bronchi are called as bronchioles. They are called as bronchioles. Okay, so singular is bronchus, plural two are called as the bronchi, and these extensions are called as the bronchioles. Now the last part is the alveoli. Alveolus is the singular and alveoli is the plural. So now these are alveoli is the final, or you can say it's a cluster of air sacs, okay, in the lungs. So you can see the cluster of air sacs. Cluster in the sense many are present in one particular place. Okay, you can see, you can understand what is cluster of grapes. Okay, one grape and cluster in the sense a group of grapes present in one particular place. So here there are clusters of air sacs which are present here, and these air sacs which are present here are called as the alveoli. One is called as the alveolus, and all together are called as the alveoli, and they are numerous in the sense very large in number, and these are responsible for the exchange of gases. That is, whenever the air comes into the trachea and then travels into the bronchi, okay, they enter into the bronchioles and they enter into the air sacs here, and these in the air sacs, the carbon dioxide which is already there, that will be replaced by the oxygen. And one more thing here is, these air-like structures which are called as alveolus, they are supplied with a large number of blood vessels. These are the blood vessels which bring the blood to the lungs, that is deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated in the sense which has carbon dioxide in it. So whatever the blood which has carbon dioxide in it, it is brought to the lungs and especially to the alveoli. So this has carbon dioxide in it, and this carbon dioxide will be exhaled outside and then oxygen will be taken inside, and this happens with the process of the diffusion. So how this process happens and all, we'll see in the next paragraph. Last year itself we have learnt about the process which is called as the diffusion. Okay, so diffusion is moving from the higher concentration into the lower concentration. Now for example, so now if you see an example, okay, actually what is the process which is happening here is, now the air which enters into your nose is the air, isn't it? That means it is a mixture of gases. It has oxygen which is 21%, nitrogen which is 78%, carbon dioxide is 0.03%. Okay, I'm talking about the complete air over here. In the air, it is around 21% of oxygen and then 78% of nitrogen, and carbon dioxide is 0.03, and nowadays we say it as 0.04% of carbon dioxide. So now here when the air enters inside, the air comes inside, not oxygen, not only oxygen, but the air comes inside the lungs. So when the air comes inside the lungs, they'll come to the nostrils, and then they will go to the nasal cavity, and then they will enter the pharynx, and then they enter the larynx, and then trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, okay, and then come to the alveoli. Now this alveoli will be full of carbon dioxide. That means if this is an alveoli, around 80% of it will be completely filled with the carbon dioxide. That means the carbon dioxide in the alveoli is higher than that of the carbon dioxide which is in the air. So now where carbon dioxide is higher, it is in the alveolus. So, and the diffusion says that movement of molecules from the higher concentration to lower concentration. So where is higher concentration? Higher concentration is in the alveoli. Where is the lower concentration? Lower concentration is in the air which we breathe. So whatever the air which is in the alveoli now will move into the atmosphere. Okay, that is, they will move to the lower concentration, because here carbon dioxide is completely low. So here whatever the carbon dioxide is here, that will move out. And whereas oxygen percent is very less here. The oxygen percent is very less here. That means in the lower concentration. But whereas when you compare it with the atmospheric oxygen, it is 21%. But whereas it is very less in the lungs. So what happens is, again the oxygen will move from the higher concentration, that is from the atmospheric oxygen, into the alveolus, because alveolus has very low concentration. That is how this is a process of diffusion which takes place, so that the oxygen from the higher concentration will come into the lower concentration. So that is how exchange of gases are taking place here. How will the exchange of gases taking place here? The alveolus will have the carbon dioxide and atmospheric has oxygen. So oxygen is coming out and carbon dioxide is going out. So that is how oxygen is coming inside the lungs, and whereas the carbon dioxide is going out of the lungs. So what's the process called as? It's nothing but the diffusion, movement of molecules from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. So by this we come to the end of the pathway of air. So we have seen the different parts of the air, and what is the last one is, and all these blood capillaries which are here, they are all the alveoli will have the n number of blood capillaries attached to that, and whatever the oxygen which is there in the alveoli now, that will be carried by the blood to the various tissues in the body, isn't it? And also they are the ones which carry the oxygen, carbon dioxide to the alveoli, and then the oxygen which is there now in the alveolus or alveoli, that will be carried again back to the tissues, okay, with the help of the blood. The oxygen will enter into the blood and combine with the pigment molecule which is called as the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is called as the oxygen carrying protein. It's called as the oxygen carrying protein. So this oxygen carrying protein which is called as the hemoglobin binds with the oxygen, and this oxygen will be sent to the different parts of the body, especially different tissues of the body. So now here what will happen after entering of the blood of the oxygen into the blood? That is what we are going to see in the next class. And then See you all. Take care and have a nice day.